Would you please rise for the national anthem?
Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians on the lands on which we live, learn, work and play. We recognise a shared commitment to the continuation of the cultural and spiritual practices of our peoples and the continuity of our communities. The Jewish community is proud of its stories of lands far from here, dating back 4,000 years. We acknowledge First Nations traditions, histories and stories of the lands upon which we meet today, which reach as far back as 60,000 years. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. I would like to acknowledge the presence of MPs representing the Labor Party, the Liberal Party and Independents, as well as representatives of the Victorian Multicultural Commission, faith and cultural leaders from many different communities, Victoria police leaders, Jewish school principals, key community leaders, and of course our wonderful community members. Your attendance tonight is appreciated. It is the JCCV's solemn duty to host this annual event, and I thank each and every one of you for joining us to remember the 6 million Jews who were killed between 1939 and 1945 during the Holocaust. 80 years on this year, we have a small but mighty group of survivors here with us tonight. For the rest of us, the Holocaust is unimaginable. No matter how many testimonies we hear, memoirs we read and documentaries we watch, we did not experience the sights, the smells, the sensations and the horrors of the Shoah. But since last Yom Hashoah, there have been reminders right here in Victoria that the hatred that led to the Holocaust still lurks. On December 6 last year, we watched as members of our Jewish community rescued damaged and charred Sifrei Torah scrolls from the remains of the Adass Israel synagogue, which had been firebombed in an act of hatred. The word triggering is used a lot today, and some may say that it is overused. But there is no doubt that this site was incredibly triggering for so many of us here tonight and for so many in our community. And yet, as we have done so many times throughout Jewish history, we will continue to gather. We will practice our faith, and we will show our unity and our strength in the face of the hate and violence. This attack reminds us that never again cannot be a passive phrase. It is an activity that requires courage, effort, and most importantly, allies. It is this effort that the JCCV recommits ourselves to on your behalf this Yom Hashoah. We will not allow the current heightened levels of anti-Jewish hate to become normalised here in Victoria. We must push it back to the margins of society where it belongs. Before I hand over to our MCs, I would like to remind everyone to please not applaud through this event to maintain the solemn tone for tonight. Thank you.
Tonight, we gather in sorrow and in remembrance to commemorate Yom Hashoah 2025, the year 5785 on the Hebrew calendar. This time, approximately 80 years ago, much of Europe had already been liberated from the Nazis by the Allies, with victory in Europe declared just a couple of weeks from today's date, on 8th of May, 1945. I use the word liberated with inverted commas because for European Jewry, the official end of the nightmare of the Shoah marked the beginning of another one, the much more personal, private, and unrelenting one of anguished nightmares and of grief. As the full reality dawned of what it meant to be a survivor, sometimes the only one, it became clear that liberation did not equate with any type of return to what was, nor to the freedom or lightness of being that the term might suggest. The loss of loving family, of friends, and of community, combined with enduring scars and trauma, created a new dystopian reality. This evening, on the 80th anniversary of liberation, we focus on what was lost and on what endures. I feel privileged to be your host this evening with my daughter-in-law, Natalie Bassat. Being here together with Natalie is the best possible personification of what endures: family, love, continuity. Natalie and her family will continue to shine the light on the darkness. It is they who will continue to remember what was lost and perpetuate what endures. My story is representative of the story of loss and endurance. I was the only survivor of my father's family. When we were liberated in Lvov, Poland, there was not a single other member of the Katz family left. From my mother's immediate family, the Vargoins of Jędrzejów, my mother was one of only 4 survivors. What was lost was incalculable. My father, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. 2 families almost totally obliterated, but not quite. Like so many in this room, we, the remnants, came here to make a new life and to recreate what we could. Many, many years after our arrival, my mother would look at wonder at her 3 grandchildren, their partners, and her 11 great-grandchildren and murmur, who would have believed that this was possible? It was possible because of what had endured: resilience, courage, determination, religion, tradition, language, Ahavat Israel. These were never lost. They endured throughout unimaginable horror and sustained us, so that decades later, my mother could look in wonder and say, who could have believed this was possible?
It is so deeply meaningful for me to be co-hosting this commemoration alongside my mother-in-law, Holocaust survivor Nina. Nina is someone who has endured horrific loss yet continues to live with extraordinary strength and grace. She embodies resilience not only through her deep love and devotion to her family, of which I'm so proud and grateful to be part of, but also through her lifelong work and commitment to our Jewish community. For decades, she has led and advocated with heart and determination, tirelessly to preserve and strengthen the very fabric of who we are. I am a descendant of Shoah survivors. My paternal grandparents, Sarah and Mottle Oaken. Through my family also threads the dynamic of what was lost and what endures. Over 90% of Lithuania's pre-war Jews were killed by the Nazis and their collaborators, so it's no surprise that my grandmother's family was also decimated. Sarah and her sister endured unthinkable horrors in the Kovno ghetto and then the Stutthof concentration camp. My grandfather and his brother survived by hiding for many months in a dark, crowded, deep underground bunker in the Bialystok ghetto. The conditions were excruciating, and when their parents and 4 other siblings left the bunker, unable to bear it any longer, they were quickly rounded up and murdered in Treblinka. Decades later, though, when I would ask my grandmother how she was feeling, she would so often reply, "I feel like the richest woman in the world," referring to us, her many precious grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Our family flourished like so many survivor families in Melbourne, and our stories are just 2 of the thousands that are represented in this room this evening. And whether you are here as a direct survivor, and we especially honour you as such, a 2nd or 3rd generation descendant, or a community member with a direct or indirect connection with the world that was decimated by the Shoah, we acknowledge that we all carry within us the same duality of loss and grief on one hand, strength and resilience on the other. The very fact that we are gathering here this evening on this night of remembrance testifies to our determination to embody the ancient model of She'arit HaPlita, the enduring remnant.
It is impossible to remember fully the world that existed before the Shoah. We must not lose sight of its colour, diversity, complexity, richness, tradition, and innovative thinking. Otherwise, we risk remembering persecution only, rather than what was lost and who was lost. We fail in our duty of Zahor to remember if we remember Auschwitz, Treblinka, Bassat, but not Warsaw, Vilna, Prague. If we remember Hitler, Himmler, Eichmann, but not the brilliant and the ordinary individuals, women, men, children, devout and secular, rich and poor, who 1 + 1 + 1 make up the 6 million who were brutally ripped away from their world, from our world.
Tonight, we remember what was lost. This phrase itself is somewhat contentious, suggesting that we passively let it go, when in reality, the Shoah was an active, aggressive, and systematic program of annihilation. Have I the wrong place?
No.
Given the enormity and diversity of pre-war Jewish life and the scale of its destruction, focusing on individual stories and small details can assist us in our task of remembrance. Our minds can relate to personal accounts far more meaningfully than to abstract facts and figures. So we will now hear voices that come to us from the 1930s in the years immediately preceding the Shoah. These are the voices of young people who submitted essays to a competition run by YIVO, a cultural organisation that was established to preserve Jewish life in Europe. Contestants were invited to write about their lives anonymously, and in doing so, have left us with the treasure trove of their individual stories, as well as those of their families and communities. They wrote these entries at a time of emerging into adulthood, and they would have had no idea of the time stamp that they were leaving, transmitting the time and texture of their lives across the generations. In this way, these voices we are about to hear are both beautiful and haunting. While these entries all come from Poland, given the diversity and the size of its Jewish population of nearly 3.5 million souls, in many ways they are representative of the young lives in interwar Europe more broadly. Members of our youth groups, many of these groups which were active in the 1930s Europe, will take part in reading extracts of 3 essays. As the essays were submitted anonymously, we only have the initials of the authors.
My arrival into the world wasn't a happy one. When they were expecting their first child, they had hoped for a boy, and when it turned out that their second child was also a girl, my mother took an instant dislike to me, which I have felt all my life. Once, during a summer vacation following the 6th grade, I could stand it no longer and ran away from home. I moved in with my aunt. With my cousin's help, I found a job as a tailor, where I worked as a finisher of trousers. I was earning 6 to 8 zloty a week, and I gave all the money to my aunt in exchange for room and board. I felt comfortable at the tailor shop and even grew to like my job. But there were moments where I was gripped by feelings of regret about not going to school and about my unfulfilled dreams of studying medicine. After several months at this job, I ran into my teacher at the street. When she asked me why I wasn't attending school, I told her that I couldn't because I had to work. She became indignant and insisted that I absolutely had to return to school. I had to agree. I went back home, quickly studied the material I had missed, and in the 2nd semester I returned to school. My teachers and relatives talked me into enrolling in a teacher's seminary, where I could graduate in less time than at other schools. They also believed that this degree would make it easier for me to find a job. I took their advice and enrolled in the seminary. I attended classes and tutored in the afternoons. Mother thought this was foolish and claimed my studies would be of no use to me. My sister, having graduated from elementary school, was learning to sew, and this pleased Mother much more.
At the teacher's seminary, I became very close friends with a Catholic girl. And this friendship, despite the difference of religion, ideology, and now the distance between us, has lasted to this very day. The letters my friend has sent me lately are quite interesting. She refers to me in them as her sister and asks me not to take to heart certain Catholic attitude towards the Jews, because in her view, these Catholics constitute a small minority, while the rest recognise the equality of all. I told her about my latest wishes and dreams, which involve going to Palestine. I joined a Zionist youth movement. I remember fondly those evenings when, after exhausting tutorials, I would drop by the headquarters, at least for a short while. It was always noisy and cheerful there, and when I left, I always felt refreshed. Whenever time allowed, I always tried to be involved and help out. I myself don't exactly know how it happened, that despite my upbringing, such a strong feeling of Jewishness awoke in me. But the strongest influence was the anti-Semitism that flourished in the schools then. My sister and brother also became ardent Zionists at the time, and this had an influence on our parents. To the extent that they could, they began to contribute to Jewish causes, shop in Jewish stores, and socialise in Jewish groups. The greatest obstacle to getting a job was my religion. I approached the president of the Trade School Association, who liked me very much and had always promised to help me. Now he said to me, I could help you if you weren't Jewish. This was very painful for me. Was it my fault that I was born Jewish? If I had the money, I would immigrate illegally, but I don't. I hope God will give me the strength and endurance so I can stay here long enough to save money for the trip. Then I'll leave for Palestine and start a new life.
When I was 3 years old, my mother took me to Cheder. I stood on the doorstep with my head hung low, my fingers in my mouth, angry, as if I somehow understood that I was being robbed of part of my childhood freedom. From the first day I went to Cheder, I felt at home with the other children. We all played together, jumping up from the ground onto the top of the chest and back down again. On one of those jumps, I smashed into the corner of my chest and cut my forehead right in the middle. After my head had healed, my mother took me to another cheder with a better Melamed, where I learned how to recite prayers. He was an older man with a grey beard, and he was very strict. He maintained authority with a leather whip that lay on the table. His face looked very severe and angry, and all the children trembled at his glance. Once I moved to school, I came in contact with all types of children, both rich and poor. I could tell them apart by their appearance and dress. We used to study and play together. We became friends. In the lower grades, the gap between rich and poor was very small, but as we got into the upper grades, say 5th or 6th grades, there were fewer and fewer poor children. At first, I couldn't accept the idea that there was a divide between the working class and the middle class. What were the factors that deepened this rift? Very simply, my friend Yudel and I didn't have textbooks, and it was hard for us to learn. Yudel's father was a bookbinder, and we both studied in his workshop. He was a class-conscious worker. As he worked, he would explain to us why things were as they were.
When I was in the 4th and 5th grades, I began to have aspirations for my future. I knew that there was such a thing as gymnasium, a more advanced school where you continued your studies and then you went to university and became an educated person, a doctor or a lawyer, and there were many other things to study as well. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't study and realize my aspirations. The turning point came unexpectedly. In the 6th grade, I felt instinctively that this road was somehow closed for me. Then one day, I came home and my father explained that I wouldn't be going to school anymore. I finally realized that higher education wasn't for me. I had to make peace with reality and abandon my dream. Eventually, I decided to learn to become a tailor and started to learn the trade. During the first weeks, I was bored and tired. My shoulders felt as though they were breaking from sitting hunched over a needle 13 hours a day. Somehow, I persevered and got through this period. I joined a youth group and discovered a new life, a life full of belief in the future. It prompted me to think about describing the evil that I had to endure in the workshop, about denouncing everything that is dark and bleak. In today's hard times, it is very difficult for me to find answers. I think that the old ways will persist until the 1950s, certainly no longer. And then the day of true brotherhood amongst nations will come. The day of our ultimate belief in a completely classless society will approach, and people throughout the world will be free. They will be free.
It is believed that G.W. perished during the Holocaust not many years after he wrote his autobiography. His death is listed in the memorial book of his hometown, but no details about how he met his death are given.
When I was 5 years old, Papa, the local town rabbi, started to teach me the Aleph base. I made good progress, and within a year I started to study the Torah. At the same time, I began to study Polish and arithmetic. Our friend said that I had a good head on my shoulders. As soon as I walked into the first grade classroom, I felt at home, because I saw so many familiar faces. Everything came easily to me, except that I didn't know how to speak Polish. But I quickly learned the language, and school was fun for me. I became very close with Nusia, the pharmacist's daughter. I would pick her up every day on the way to school, and after school she would walk me home. I learned to speak Polish from her, because although she is Jewish, she didn't know Yiddish. At this time, our family celebrated an event that I've only witnessed once in my life. Grandfather had commissioned a scribe to write the Torah scroll. When it was completed, many guests gathered for the dedication ceremony. The procession that carried the Torah scroll from Grandfather's house to the synagogue was beautiful. Distinguished guests accompanied the Torah under a canopy. Alongside them, people carried candles and lit sparklers. The peasants kept their distance. None of them dared come close. For a long time afterwards, I dreamt every night about the dedication of the Torah.
My parents told me that I could continue with school only if I could be excused on Saturdays. I would give private lessons to deal with the problem of money, and I would also receive some food from home. On the first day of classes, I submitted a request to be excused from attending school on Saturdays. 3 days later, during one of the recesses, a teacher informed me that the director would not grant my request because the regulations of the school required all students to attend on Saturdays. Despite this, I went to the director, but he told me the same thing in person. When I went to the office to collect my old report cards, the secretary tried to talk me into staying at the school, because once I left, I would never be allowed to return. But I didn't hesitate even for a moment. By evening, I was back home. Years have passed on since then, and I'm now trying to complete school. I'm studying hard to catch up. If I pass the entry test, I'll stay in town and attend school. I'll stay even if I have to support myself by giving lessons. After all, it's high time, at the age of 17, for me to be in the 3rd year of gymnasium. If I ever do graduate, I'll be able to make the bold proclamation that I made it to the North Pole at a snail's pace. I've never had a vacation as horrible as the one this year, because it seems to me that uncertainty is the worst possible misery. All day long, the same thought pounds inside my head. Will I pass?
It is not known if Etta survived World War II and the Holocaust. Her overseas relatives never heard from her again after 1939.
The song Vilna Vilna was written in the early 1930s by A.L. Wolfson to music by Alexander Olshanetsky. The Yiddish song was composed as a heartfelt tribute to the city of Vilna, a center of Jewish cultural and intellectual life, widely known in the Jewish world as the Jerusalem of Lithuania. Perhaps its composers sensed its days as a Jewish epicenter were numbered. The song came to be frequently performed in the Vilna ghetto during the Nazi occupation and became an anthem of sorts amid the destruction. It is sung this evening by Freddie Marocchi, accompanied by Tommy Kalinsky.
Vilna, Stadt von Geist und Mimes, Vilna, jiddischlach Vertracht, wo es murmeln stillet vieles, stilles Säudes von der Nacht. Oftmals seh ich dich in Cholem, heis geliebte Vilna mein, und die alte Vilna Ghetto in a nepeldicken Schein. Vilna, Vilna, unser Heimstatt, unser Bänkschaft und Bagell. Ich ruf dein Namen von mein heutiger Häusertrell. Vilna Gesslach, Vilna Teichen, Vilna Wälder, Berg und Tal. Etwas Neuet, etwas bängt sich noch die Zeiten von Amor. Wälderle Sakretel in sein Schatten eingehielt, wo geheimes haben Lehre unser Wissen duscht gestillt. Vilna hat dem ersten Faden von der Freiheitsfront gewählt. Die Liebe der Bänkschaft unbekerl. Ach, wie oft es ruft dein Namen von mein euer Häuser trau. Wilner Gesslach, Wilner Teichen, Wilner Berger Berg und Hoh. Etwas Neues, etwas bängt sich noch die Zeiten von Amor.
It is a very great honour to hear testimony from a survivor this evening and hear his story of loss and endurance. Peter Gaspar, OAM, was born in Czechoslovakia in 1937. When he was just 4 years old, the Nazis invaded his hometown, Bratislava, changing Peter's life forever. Through years of stress, fear, hardship, starvation and sickness, remnants of the Gaspar family miraculously survived and arrived in Australia in 1949. Thank you, Peter, for addressing us this evening.
It is the 8th of May, 1945. My mother and I, in the Terezin concentration camp, have just been liberated by the Russian army. We have been here for 6 months. I'm 7 years old and my first thought is food, a release from almost 4 years of constant hunger. Then I think of finding my mother in the chaos that has overtaken the camp. I know that she's somewhere nearby. She's also looking for me. When will I find her? Not if, when. My mother is thinking about me, when, and she's also thinking about if, when. My father, whom we have not seen for 6 months, when we were separated at our arrest. My mother is also thinking about if she will ever see her mother, sisters, brother, who were arrested in Bratislava, our hometown, in March 1942 and have not been heard of since. Terezin was our final destination after 3 years of running and hiding to escape arrest. During those 3 years, we were hidden in the homes of several Christian families in Bratislava as well as a nearby village. We were virtual strangers in those homes. Some of them were the homes of my father's friends from the insurance company where he worked until he was sacked because he was a Jew. These people not only risked their lives in order to save us, they risked the lives also of their whole family in order to protect us from arrest, for no reward because we had nothing to offer them. Nor did they ask for anything. They did what they knew was the right thing to do under the circumstances. That knowledge was their reward. After the war, I offered to initiate action with the Yad Vashem to have them recognized as righteous amongst nations. They were not interested. They were not motivated by either money nor expectations of medals or certificates. Bravery and moral strength of such people, and there were thousands of them throughout Europe, but too few, is now well known, but it took years to be acknowledged and appreciated by the larger world community. As it is with survivors 80 years on, few of them are left. They are seldom spoken of, but we, and others who have survived due to their heroism and self-sacrifice must never forget them. They stood up for what was right while the rest of the world, not just Europe, stood by and watched. While hiding, the conditions were very often extremely difficult and harsh. Very small spaces we were forced to hide in were much more demanding of my parents than me, a small child. Mostly we were very cold and damp, always in darkness, in cellars, attics, roof cavities, cupboards, barns, haystacks, hidden in cattle sheds and sleeping amongst cattle and horses. My mother, and surely my father, somewhere else, always had worries about the rest of their family. Being a child, my parents did not share with me the dread and fear of the rest of the for the rest of the family. However, through very active rumours and speculation network which operates at such times, my parents would have been well aware of the unspeakable possibilities. Week after week, the risks of hiding, the tension and fear increased. I did not fully understand it, but I absorbed it. By December 1944, midwinter, with temperatures of minus 20 and 25 degrees and meters of snow everywhere, we were hiding in a hole dug out of the fields, way behind the outskirts of a small village we had been hiding in. After a few days in that graveside size hole, I became ill. There was no possibility to call a doctor for me, and we had no medication of any sort. My parents realised that I was unlikely to get better in that cold, damp hole. We climbed out, we walked to the nearest village where there was a police station, and we asked to be arrested. My parents had reached the limit of their endurance. There were no other options available. In one respect, my parents told me many years later that being arrested and already in camp was a relief for them. There was no more need to run and hide and think and fear. Now the stress was over. All we had to do is survive. Terezin was a transit camp. Some called it a ghetto, some called it the waiting room for hell. We arrived there because by the time we were arrested in December 1944, the extermination camps in Poland had either been liberated by the Russian army, Majdanek, Bassat, Sobibor. Auschwitz was liberated in January 1945. Terezin was a major exercise in deception by the Nazi agenda of making Europe Judenfrei, Jew-free. This was first an 18th century little garrison town until 1941, when its citizens were relocated elsewhere in order to make room for a concentration camp. Actually, the Nazi propaganda ministry named it a spa, into which Jewish women and children were being resettled for their own protection, safe from the ravages of war raging in Europe right around them. Late in 1944, a propaganda film was made named Theresienstadt and completed in March 1945. Imagine, 2 months before the end of the war, the Nazis were still making propaganda films. The purpose of this film was again to deceive the public, and more especially the International Red Cross, about the horrific reality of the 40,000 odd camps operating in Europe at the time. This film was briefly shown in newsreels throughout Germany. After the war, parts of the film were reused and a book was published under the name of The Führer Gave the Jews a City. In reality, while not an extermination camp, 40,000 people died in Terezin due to malnutrition, great congestion, disease, and lack of any medical care. Another 80,000 odd people were transported to extermination, from Terezin to extermination camps in Poland. From these, very few ever came back. Numbers are just numbers. Each number was an individual. Each left a broken family. Each was unrealized potential. My mother and Paul and I survived, reunited in Bratislava on the 20th of June 1945, when my dad returned from the Sachsenhausen camp where he was a slave laborer. My Paul came back from Auschwitz. All we had is each other. The rest of the family in Slovakia and Hungary were never seen again. There are no graves for them. I never knew my grandparents. Today, being a grandparent myself, I miss not having had them more than ever before. Nobody survives those experiences unmarked, undamaged. My parents more than I, still a child. I lost less because I knew less. We lost all our family, 40 persons, of whom I only knew 3 or 4. Most of my friends perished, most of my parents' friends perished. Our community was broken, society and culture lost. My parents could not even imagine what their future would look like. 3 years later, in February 1948, when communism came to power in Czechoslovakia, what the Nazis had not looted, the communists took away. While no longer state policy, anti-Semitism became more aggressive under communism. It was then that my parents made the decision to emigrate as far as possible from Europe, and Australia was almost beyond their imagination at the time, but the best of the few available alternatives. In 1949, we arrived in Melbourne with little luggage, less money, but a lot of baggage. We were migrants on paper, but refugees in reality. Refugees from the Holocaust, from communism, from anti-Semitism, refugees from our memories. With little English in language skills, my parents worked very hard, starting a few days after their arrival in menial jobs way below their skills level and qualifications. They never stopped being homesick, not for what they left behind, but for what they remembered from their early years. They remembered their dreams, nostalgic for the life they had imagined for themselves in the future, shortly after they were married, until the unimaginable happened. I have always missed not having childhood friends. Those that survived are left behind when we emigrated, and some of those have since dispersed all over the world, and I have lost track of them. On the other hand, I thrived in Australia in the good air, the sunshine, the open spaces, the freedom and the opportunities. Certainly there was some prejudice against migrants, but it was not hostile, and it's not aggressive, and not anti-Semitic. While I was readily accepted at school, but on another level, I always remained an outsider, and I did not understand why. That changed in the second half of my teens when I transferred to Melbourne High School, and there I discovered a Jewish community. I was no longer an outsider, and I made lifelong friends. There I became a part of this community. A sense of having found home, a sense of belonging arose. I had not stopped growing since. I became involved in the Jewish community more and more so as I became older, especially since I retired. For many years, while the Iron Curtain was down, I lost contact with my remaining childhood friends in Bratislava. Shortly after the fall of communism in 1989, I went back there, as well as Terezin. Each time I met some of my childhood friends, as well as those people that we called our rescuers. I came away sad to have seen the limited life they have been forced to live in the past 60 years under communism, socially, economically, culturally, and certainly not Jewish in any sense. These friends remain in Slovakia, bound by their roots. They hoped that things would get better, but they didn't. For some, it was just inertia. I compared my life to theirs. Each time I came back to Australia, again and again I was grateful for where we finished up. Holocaust survivors have played a great part in creating the community we have here today. This community has earned the admiration and envy of all who visit here from all parts of the world. We must remember and celebrate the resilience and achievements of the survivors who have built this community. This is their affirmation and victory over those who tried to wipe us out and destroy our culture. This is Remembrance Day, but it is also about the present and the future. It will take more of the same energy, imagination, and dedication to maintain and build on the base that we have inherited. Never again is today more relevant than any other time in the past 80 years. Partly healed scars are reopening. I hope and believe that what we are experiencing now will pass, and future generations, our children, grandchildren, and more, will realise and enjoy the richness of the inheritance and treasure it. To close, I would like to quote Olga Horak, OAM, a Czechoslovak-born Holocaust survivor and author. People say, live for the future. Don't live in the past. But I don't live in the past. The past lives in me. Thank you.
I would like to thank Peter for sharing his moving testimony with us and for the very poignant words that he left us with. I'd also like to thank him for the incredibly important work which he has been doing for many years, which he continues to do in perpetuating the memory of the Shoah. It is now my honour to invite this evening 6 candle lighters for the ritual of remembrance through the lighting of Yahrzeit candles, beginning with Peter. We are blessed to be able to call on 6 survivors to light our candles this evening as they're introduced by their family members. The candles they light serve as memorials to their family members who were killed. Collectively, the 6 candles serve as our community's remembrance for the 6, for the 60, for the 600 and the 600,000 and the 6 million individual lives. Following the candle lighting, we will recite El Melech Rachamim and Kaddish to be led by cantor Greg Horvitz.
It's my great privilege to introduce my amazing mum, Rachel Kalman, OAM, to light a candle. At the beginning of the war, Rachel's parents, Sura and Chaim Eno, were living along the Russian border of Poland, having moved from Warsaw to escape persecution. They were rounded up by the Russians along with 4 other couples and forced to work in slave labour camps in Siberia. Chaim did back-breaking work in the forests, and Sarah was in the fields picking seasonal produce under challenging conditions, especially during the long Siberian winters. Sura and Chaim welcomed Rachel into the world in September 1940. Shortly afterwards, the family was separated. When Chaim was forced to serve in the Russian army, Sura and Mum were transported to Ukraine. Due to Sura's incredible resourcefulness and a minor miracle, they both survived, despite near starvation and cruelty from the locals. In the winter of 1946, Rachel, aged 5, together with Sura, managed to escape and made their way back to Warsaw. Sura was devastated to learn that the home they left was now part of the destroyed Warsaw Ghetto, and that her husband Chaim had been murdered 2 days before Poland was liberated. With no immediate surviving family, Sura and her precious Rachel made their way to Lodz, then Paris, ultimately Melbourne, to start a new life. Today, my mum has 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Rachel was a highly regarded physiotherapist. Her husband of 40 plus years, Peretz, Zichron Labracha, introduced her to football. She became a passionate Collingwood supporter. The family try not to hold this against her. Some of Rachel's achievements include being the honorary physio for the Ajax Football Club for more than 15 years. She was also the first woman to travel with a Commonwealth Games team in a medical capacity in 1978. Rachel spent 35 years volunteering at the Kadima Library, only retiring in 2024. Rachel has a Master's in Education from Monash University and numerous other academic qualifications. Rachel was honoured in 2006 with an Order of Australia Medal for her incredible contribution to Australian society. I'm so proud of my mum. In lighting this candle, she honours those we have lost. May their memory be a blessing.
Privilege to introduce my pa, Wolf Dean, born Valek Fabishevich, to light a candle. During the war, Pa was interned in the Lodge ghetto for 4 years with his parents Jakob and Suraleya Fabishevich, living in a single room. There was little or no access to running water or a sewer system, and each person received meagre food rations. At first, Pa attended a ghetto high school, until it was closed when the Nazis commanded all able-bodied Jews into forced labour. Pa then worked for more than 2 years emptying trucks laden with potatoes. In August 1944, the Lodge ghetto was liquidated, and Pa and his parents were transported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Upon arrival, Pa was separated from his mother, who was sent to the gas chambers. Soon after, he was sent with his father to a metalworking factory in Vechelde, Germany. Pa's father died of illness, and he was subsequently transported to Wuttenstutt, then Webelen, where he was liberated on the 2nd of May 1945. Pa often describes this day as the date of his rebirth. Pa arrived in Haifa on the Esno Sharene ship and lived in Israel for 3 years, putting himself through night school while working as a labourer during the day. He was accepted into Imperial College in London and completed his civil engineering degree in 1955 before emigrating to Australia. Pa had a very successful career, and today he and his wife of 63 years, 2 children and 4 grandchildren, love spending time with each other, and the challenges of word and number games keep him occupied. I am so proud of my precious Pa, who is now in his 100th year. In lighting this candle, Pa honours his dear parents and all those who we have lost. May their memory be a blessing.
My great privilege to introduce my nanny Sarah Newhouse to light a candle. During the war, my nanny Sarah was living in Arnhem, Holland. Her father Ephraim, uncles and many other Jewish men in the town were taken to Westerbork transit camp, where they were later transported to Auschwitz and never returned. At the same time, Nanny's mother, Alida, befriended a policeman in the Dutch underground resistance movement. The policeman arranged locations to hide my nanny, her brother, mother and grandmother. At the age of 3, Nanny was separated from her family and hidden with a Dutch family. Her name was changed and the family pretended she was a cousin visiting from another city. On a few occasions, when German soldiers came to the house, she was hidden behind a false wall and was never discovered. She remained hidden with this family for 3 years. In 2018, Nanny returned to Holland and reconnected with the family who hid her. We are so grateful for them for risking their lives to save hers. A few years after the war, Nanny's mother remarried. Nanny's stepfather, Abraham, had lost his wife and 4 children in Auschwitz. Being a tailor, he survived by sewing for the German soldiers. Shortly after their marriage, Nanny's mother passed away during a surgery. Abraham remarried again, and in 1951, Nanny moved to Australia with her brother and step-parents. In 1961, Nanny married my papa Harry. Today they have 3 children, 8 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. Nanny still enjoys hosting Shabbat dinners and spending time with her many friends and growing family. We are so proud of our Nanny. In lighting this candle, she honours those we have lost. May their memory be a blessing.
It is my great privilege to introduce my dad, Joe Nowicki, to light a candle. Dad was born January 1, 1938, near his mother's hometown of Shechanov, Poland. His father, Wolf, was from Malava and was a soldier in the Polish army. At the beginning of the war, his mother, Sarah, and Aunt Genya fled with Joe on horse and cart north towards Russia, where they met up with Wolf. Joe's family spent the war travelling from city to city, staying wherever they could, during which time his younger brother Max was born somewhere in Russia. Eventually they made their way to Germany after travelling through Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan and various other countries. The family spent approximately 4 years in displaced persons camps in Germany before arriving in Melbourne in 1949. Aged 11, Dad settled in Carlton with his parents and his brother to start their new life, attending Lee Street State School, then Princes Hill and Uni High. He ran a successful panel beating business in South Melbourne with his brother for over 55 years. Today, Dad is blessed with 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and enjoys gardening, reading the newspaper daily, going to U3A and spending time with his wife Sandra and his family. I'm so proud of my precious Dad. In lighting this candle, he honours those we have lost. May their memory be a blessing.
It is my great privilege to introduce my mother, Erika Friedenberg, nee Strauss, to light a candle. During the war, Erika spent much of the first year of her life in a Red Cross home, and subsequently with the family surviving in the Budapest ghetto in the basement of a safe house, under the protection of the Swiss ambassador Karl Lutz and under the watchful eye of her uncle, Nando Eichel, who worked as a quasi-ambassador. Erika owes her life to her uncle. Towards the end of the war, when Adolf Eichmann arrived in Budapest to facilitate the final solution of Hungary's many thousands of Jews, Erika survived with her sisters and parents hiding in the basement. Many of her relatives were not so fortunate. In lighting this candle, Erika honours those members of her family who were lost in the Shoah, amongst them 2 beautiful young women, her aunts Matti and Rose, and the wife and 9 children lost from her uncle Shlomo Kohn. In November 1949, when Mum was 6, she left Budapest with her family on a train bound for Paris via Vienna, assisted by the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. Her family then migrated to Sydney. Mum married our father, Harry Friedenberg, and settled in Melbourne in 1970, where they've enjoyed a full and productive life. In her professional life, she has worked in the fields of psychology and education, published extensively on coping, resilience and fortitude across the lifespan, and has recently completed a manuscript on the story of Budapest 1940 to 1945, with the focus on the work of good men in bad times. Today, Erica has 2 adult children, myself and my brother Josh. We both endeavour to contribute to support the community through our skills and chosen careers. Erica wishes that her 5 grandchildren emulate the examples set by their parents to contribute to the social good in whichever way they are able, to honour those we have lost. May their memory be a blessing.
Thank you everyone for rising for El Melech Rachamim and then Kaddish.
Hametzei menochanechayena tachas kanfei hashechiena b'malai zekedoshim uteoirim kezayah Mazirim Esenishemais Esenishemais Sheish million kedoshim uteoirim shehometu v'sheneregu v'shenishchetu v'shenisrefu v'shenitbeu V'shenechneku al kiddush Hashem al yedei atzoirerim hanatzim ve'ozreim yemach shemom zichram Bi-Auschwitz Maidanik Dachau, Birkenau, Treblinka, Besen, Mauthausen, Bahavur, She'anachnu misepalelim, Beyad Haskaras Nishmasam Lachein 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 Bal Rachamim ויסתירם בסייסר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור ביצרור החיים אס נשמסם Sam Ve'anuchu B'shalom Ha'al Mishkevo Yesam V'noemar Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbah v'almad yibrach Yerusei v'yamlich malchusei b'chayei choin v'mei choin v'chayei l'chol beis Yisrael v'agalav izman kariv v'yimeru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam v'lomei almaya Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yispar v'yisreiman v'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yisaleh v'yisalal shemei dekudusha b'richu Yehei Shlam Rabbah min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'yimeru Amen. Oseh shalom v'imroimav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'yimeru Amen.
Unter deiner weißen Stern, under your white stars, is one of the most haunting and beautiful songs to have come out of the Vilna ghetto. Written by poet Avraham Sutzkever and set to music by Avram Brudno. The song addresses God directly, expressing pain and anguish, seeking recognition and praying for relief. Lila Kameliwolski, Gideon Priest, Yoni Ringelblum will perform it this evening.
Keller, die
While our focus on Yom HaShoah is on remembering the deceased and the world that was, this evening we're also honouring what endures, not in the places of destruction, but here in Melbourne. Indeed, one of the purposes of the biblical imperatives of Zachor, remember, possibly its primary purpose, is to shape the present and the future. Survivors of the Shoah, including those who came to Melbourne fleeing the rise of Nazism in the 1930s, faced enormous challenges as they sought to rebuild their lives and families while dealing with the enormity of their grief and losses. Amid this, they committed themselves to remembering through shaping their new community along the contours of the communities from which they came, communities which are now destroyed. While there were certainly survivors here as elsewhere who were broken by their experience, an overriding sense of hope fueled the rebuilding. Survivors established charitable organizations. They reinvigorated existing shuls and established new ones. They supported one another through Landsmannschaft, the mutual aid and support groups based on cities of origin. And perhaps most radically, they fought relentlessly for the establishment and expansion of Jewish schools. There was not a single Jewish day school prior to 1939. Today we have flourishing schools across the spectrum of Jewish life. Our community would not be what it is without them. We will hear from students of these schools about their origins and how they are rooted in the world that was lost and yet are embodiments of endurance.
I'm a student at Bialik College. During the 1920s, Melbourne became home to a group of committed Zionists who had fled anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe for Palestine, only to find life there unsustainable for economic reasons. On arrival in Melbourne, they set about promoting the cause of Zionism and the Hebrew language. Cultural Judaism was more central than religious Judaism. They established a Hebrew school in Carlton in the 1930s, and this laid the foundations for Bialik Kindergarten and later college, modelled on schools that were already operating in Lithuania, Poland, Austria and Romania. Bialik opened its doors in 1942, one of the most bitter years of the Shoah, and was named after the preeminent Hebrew poet of the 20th century, Chaim Nachman Bialik. I am proud to be a student of this school that straddles the lost and the enduring, cultivating in us the passion of Tushu Nu Oz, step forth in pride.
I'm a student at Sholem Aleichem College. The college as we know it today was born out of secular Yiddish Sunday schools that were established in Melbourne. The Yale Peretz Sunday School established in 1935 and the Sholem Aleichem Sunday School established in 1947. The college was inspired by the Tzisho school system of Eastern Europe established by the Jewish Labour Bund and the Left Poalei Zion. This was a secular Yiddish network of kindergarten schools and teacher colleges, active in Poland and Lithuania from 1921. At its peak, Tzisho had over 24,000 students across 219 educational institutes. Despite Tzisho's former dissolution in 1940 due to Nazi and Soviet invasions, its staff continued their work by providing underground education in the ghettos, a true act of resistance. In addition, many of its students became active in various forms of resistance, cultural and physical. Sholem Aleichem College is the proud beneficiary of the Tzisho system and continues its mission of providing secular Yiddish education today. I am proud to be a student of this school that straddles the lost and the enduring, cultivating in us values to last a lifetime, including Yiddishkeit and Menschlichkeit.
I am a student at Mount Scopus Memorial College. On the 8th of February 1949, Mount Scopus College opened its doors on St Kilda Road to 114 students from kindergarten to Year 6. It was the first co-educational Jewish day school in Melbourne. Founder Ben-Zion Patkin, born in Russia, immigrated to Palestine and from there to Melbourne. He was a passionate Zionist leader who proposed that the only solution for a good Jewish education was a Jewish day school based on his experiences in Europe. When he first proposed this idea in the 1930s, the Jewish community of the time, largely Anglo in background, was not ready for this idea. After World War II, and with the influx of Holocaust survivor refugee children, the idea took on more urgency and relevance. Named Mount Scopus Memorial College, the school's name and the black portion of the crest remind us of the school's birth out of the ruins of destruction. I am proud to be a student of this school that straddles the lost and the enduring, instilling in us, as Moshe did of Joshua and the children of Israel, the qualities of chazak ve'ematz, be strong and of good courage.
I am a student at Liebli College. The college was founded in 1962 as a primary school under the auspices of the Melbourne Mizrahi Synagogue, later extending to a secondary school. The Mizrahi movement, of which Yavner is a part, was established in Vilnius, Lithuania in 1902 as a religious Zionist organization, the first of its kind and radical at the time. It arrived formally in Melbourne when it was established in 1943 by a group of refugees who had been active in Mizrahi back in Europe. Yavna is committed to the secure progress of Medinat Yisrael and the enhancement of Torah true Judaism. I am proud to be a student of the school that straddles the lost and the enduring, educating us within a threefold cord of Orthodox Judaism, religious Zionism, and strong general education.
I am a student at the King David School, a progressive Jewish school established in 1978 and thus the newest of the Jewish day schools. The school can also trace its origins to the world that was lost. Progressive Judaism as a movement and an orientation to the world seeking to maintain loyalty to Judaism's deepest values while responding to ever-changing society emerged in 19th century Germany. The first female ordained rabbi, Regina Jonas, was trained in Berlin despite intense opposition from men and was killed in Auschwitz in 1944, while Rabbi Leo Beck, the leader of the Reform movement, indeed of all German Jews under the Nazis, chose to remain with this community, was imprisoned at Theresienstadt, and only narrowly survived the Shoah. A synagogue in Melbourne is named after him, as well as our partner school in Israel. I am proud to be a student at the King David School that straddles the lost and the enduring, inspiring us to know and understand, lehavin or lehaskil.
I am a student at UJEB, the United Jewish Board of Education. The work of this board goes back to the 19th century, when the community turned its attention to providing young people with a Jewish education. In the 1930s and the 1940s, as the need for education became more urgent, with the arrival of Jewish refugee children from Europe, UJEB expanded its offerings in terms of curriculum and location, opening centres in Camberwell and Northcote, and other places. As early as 1941, at UJEB's annual general meeting, Rabbi Friedman emphasised that as the centres of Jewish life in European countries were being destroyed, the Jewish educational efforts in Australia became much more important. I am proud to be a student at UJEB, which grounds its education in values of identity, engagement, community, and inclusivity.
Leah Goldberg was born in Lithuania, where she witnessed the horrors of the First World War and made Aliyah in the 1930s when the Nazis came to power. The Hebrew song, Ha'omnam, is conventionally known by the title, Will There Really Be Days Yet to Come? This poem is about the Shoah and centres on a woman who longs for the day when life returns to its simplicity. A day when it will be permissible to love again, and a day when the memory of horrors, terror and blood will be less intense. It is performed for us this evening by Tammy Cohen, Rachel Moschel and Jonathan Scovron.
ופשוטים הדברים וחיים ומטבע נצרבת בלהט, השרפות בדרכים שסמרו מהמה ומדם, וביושר לבב שוב תהי ענווה ונכנעת, כאחד הדשאים, כאחד הדם.
We're approaching the end of our commemoration. The next 24 hours are painful as we engage more actively with the loss and legacy of the Shoah. Some of us might light Yisco candles to symbolize this remembrance. Memories of lost family members and of lost communities weigh heavily on us. The price they paid for being Jewish at that time and in those places was the highest imaginable. We are a resilient people. We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring back what and who was lost. We can, however, seek to honor their memory through what endures. And what endures, our community, our tradition, our families, our organizations, our diversity, our language, does not happen by itself, but through commitment and assertion. As we find ourselves living during particularly challenging times, with anti-Semitism on the rise locally and globally, these qualities of tenacity and of assuredness of who we are must be cultivated.
Evil and hatred may define the Shoah, but stories of hope and the resilience of the human spirit light the way forward for us. In my grandmother's story, Sarah and her sister Miriam found the courage to escape from a horror death march. And whilst they never gave up hope, they probably would not have survived for long if not for the bravery of one individual. This extraordinary Polish farmer, whom we only know as Joseph, and who was a stranger to them, had the humanity to care and, most importantly, the courage to act. Joseph gave food and shelter to the emaciated Sarah and Miriam, safekeeping them until liberation. He, like many other righteous Gentiles, chose to be guided by his moral compass rather than state-sanctioned anti-Semitism. And in my grandfather's story, although there was much abhorrent suffering and tragedy, there was also remarkable resilience, resistance, and the enduring hope for freedom. To quote 100-year-old A.B. Goldberg, an esteemed Shoah survivor who has been telling his story for decades and is still today a much-loved, proud board member of the Melbourne Holocaust Museum, he says, "You must do everything you can to hold on to hope. The strength of hope is a powerful force." As the number of survivors in our community continues to inevitably diminish, we, the next generations, have the responsibility and the privilege to tell the stories for those that cannot. It is our turn now to carry the torch of remembrance, to make a commitment to bring their lessons forward into the future, and to ensure that their long-term legacy is one of enduring humanity, resilience and hope.
We Jews have throughout the millennia faced challenging times. For us tonight, the focus is on the horrific period of our recent history, which still remains to me incomprehensible, decades after it ended. My mother told me that when we were in the Lviv ghetto, and I was not yet 4 years old, I asked her, "Why are they killing us?" My mother replied, "Because we are Jewish." My response, she told me, was, "They cannot kill you just for being Jewish. They can only kill you if you've done something very bad." She said she was never able to give me a rational answer, and to this day, I wrestle with the concept of being maligned or harassed or persecuted on the basis of who you are. And yet, throughout her life, my mother did provide, if not an answer, but a solution. She taught me that no matter what the circumstances, I should remain a proud Jew, that I should draw on the strength of my ancestors and know that our survival is because we are Jews. It is these qualities of pride in our heritage, of the value of our teachings, of our enduring resilience, which have enabled us to survive again and again and again. These are the qualities that no one can take from us, and it is these qualities which empower us to survive and to triumph, even at the most difficult of times.
The words of the partisan song, "Sag nit keine Mal," are as moving now as they were when they were written in 1943 by Hirsch Glick. We are here. Please rise for this song, followed by the Hatikva, Israel's anthem of hope, led by the combined schools choir, accompanied by Tommy Kalinsky and conducted by Ilana Perlich.
you.